we get back to you. Okay.
I have a
Any further?
question.
One more comment, okay?
Yeah. I have several things. One, I've called you, you never answer. I've emailed you, I get an answer a couple of days later. To talk about
That's
in
true.
terms of a hotline is, I think, preposterous. And I don't think it's because I'm a journalist, because when I call, I'm just calling free. So this is not an immediate answer situation as far as I've experienced.
Okay.
And I think these folks talking about a hotline kind of thing where they get an immediate response. Another thing is, there's no question that you are using most of Site 12s for what you refer to as wetlands and wildlands. They're doing the same thing at Chrissy Field because that was their trash dump. That's where they put all the trash. And I was told that by people who work there. It's all open information.
Okay.
Now, I'm concerned about the two places that you say you are going to have residential housing because they're the two most radiologically contaminated places on the island. One is near building 342, whatever that is, over there in that complex of the Radiac schools. And you're talking about building housing there. And the other one is over near the west side solid waste disposal area where the Pandemonium 1 was. So,
Sure.
big question there. And the rest of it you're using as wetlands and wildlands, which I'm
Okay.
assuming is because it's contaminated.
Alrighty, thank you.
Is that true?
So, let me try and digest all that. Okay, so building 342. Building 342, I believe, is the Radiac Training School. I believe it's part of Site 24.
It's next to a bunker where strontium
Yeah, please,
90
let
was
me-
stored and plutonium was stored there.
Ms. Hardy, how about letting me finish? Thank you.
Well,
So building 342 is the Radiac Training School. It's part of Site 24. It's not part of Site 12. Here's the thing. Building 342 is listed in the final supplemental technical memo of the radiological assessment, Mr. Clark's document, as radiologically impacted. Radiologically impacted means it warrants further investigation. I do have to point out that you just told people here that there's radiation contamination there. That is an absolute error, okay? We've gone over this before, and I know it can be very confusing, particularly if you don't do this
I'm
for a
not
living.
confused, that's been
Please let me
documented.
finish now, it's my
been
turn.
documented.
Okay, let me speak, and then you can speak again. But let me finish, please. There's a big difference between being radiologically impacted, and then, which means needs further investigation, and then calling it out to people as there's contamination there. I don't know there's contamination there. He doesn't know there's contamination there. You should not say there's contamination there when the Navy hasn't even done the investigation yet on that. But we did do Mr. Clark did the responsible thing. He said this should be subject to further investigation, and the regulators in the state of California agreed. And you know what's going to happen? The Navy's going to do that investigation. So let's all together wait for that investigation to take place, and then look at the data, and then make a determination. It may well be many sites that are radiologically impacted on many military bases turn out to have no radiation contamination at them. But it's comforting to know that the investigation was done on those rad-impacted sites and that they can be properly closed out without there having been any contamination. So let's not jump ahead and make a conclusion which may well be faulty before we've ever gone out in the field and investigated that. So I just want to make that point. Second point, I don't want anyone to be confused when you say you're planning to use. Dave and I and Patricia and Chris of the Navy team, we're not planning to use for anything. When you're talking about residential parts of the island and wildlands and wetlands, which are proper designations for portions that are going to be redeveloped, that's the redevelopment plan of the city of San Francisco, okay? That's their desires in the future of what they want to use the land for. That's not the Navy's desires. Where the Navy comes into play is the Navy cleans up, and I believe Mr. Beck, when he was addressing another comment, alluded to this. Where the Navy comes into play is we're required to look at that redevelopment plan and to clean up to levels that are compatible to that redevelopment plan, okay? And to be protective of human health and the environment. That's part of what we have to do. That's part of what the regulators in the state of California ensure that we do. But let's not anyone get confused between, who's redeveloping the island and who's cleaning up to a level that allows for that redevelopment. I just need to make that point because it's easy to get confused on this, and I understand why folks do, but part of my job to just make sure that people get clear on that. So any site that's RAD impacted, whether it's Pandemonium 1 or whether it's another site on the western side, will be, depending upon where you're at on the site, thoroughly investigated and will have to be closed out. And will have to be closed out to very high standards with the state of California before any redevelopment can proceed. Now, in addition to that, and I think anyone who's been to Board of Supervisor meetings or tight board meetings knows this, the city of San Francisco has a requirement that they're not going to take any property that's encumbered with contamination that hasn't been properly closed out and cleaned up. And that's absolutely reasonable for any city to do before they redevelop property. So the process as it unfolds is we have to investigate it, we have to clean up what we find, we have to certify that, demonstrate that to the regulators, and they must then go and approve it before the property can ever be transferred and ultimately redeveloped. So that's the larger process to what happens here. And I just want everyone to be clear that is the process in place. And the great thing about that process is it has a lot of safeguards in it. A lot of safeguards in it. So whatever was at a site, once it's identified, has to be investigated, cleaned up, certified, and approved before it can ever be transferred to the state of California. And that's a good thing to know, and it's part of the safeguards of the process.
May I respond now? May I talk now?
I just want to let you know that we're a little more than 20 minutes past time.
Okay.
too.
All right.
I would like to point out that Building 233 is very close to where the radioactive spills are. There was a very bad spill on the island in 1950.
Correct.
And that is in the same area. That has been documented. It is clear.
Right.
Okay.
And what's also been documented, Ms. Harvey, if I can, what's also been documented about Building 233 is that the Navy's done a final status survey on Building 233, showing that they cleaned up the entire site. And in fact, the state of California, the Department of Public Health in the state of California that deals with radiological items, has actually taken their own samples and they're running those now.
You're talking about the DTSC.
No, I'm talking about CDPH that works with DTSC on radiologically impacted sites. But pointing out that there was a spill in Building 233 is pointing out what was already promulgated by the Navy. And that's actually, when it gets closed out in the near future, which I hope it will be, is going to be a great success story for the Navy because the Navy identified where it was, did extensive work there, did extensive confirmation work there, and then the state will have gone out and collected its own samples, and then again, let's see what the data says. I believe it'll say that we cleaned up everything, and then the site will most probably be formally closed out. And that is a great victory for everybody because that means we have one more site on the planet that's been thoroughly and appropriately cleaned up. So that's going to be a success story.
Well, thank you for making that statement on the record. And I wish to point out that I am not confused. I understand everything that you've said. I've been to many of these meetings. And if anybody wants to enjoy the entire van trip that you took the community on, again, completely, you can go to my YouTube channel, which is Carol Harvey SF. It is all there.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on the agenda at this point. We'll go to Mr. Clark. He needs to talk about document tracking sheet and the field schedule.
Okay, thank you, Keith. So just a few highlights for the document tracking sheet. Again, when you look at it, this is something that mainly we use with the regulatory agencies to aid in